This is Rugby Unity. I am David Pembroke, and ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, we are going to introduce a little bit more structure to this podcast, which mission is to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world. What we're going to do, off the back of Eddie Jones last week saying, there are 4 things that I like. So what we're going to do from now on is we're going to take a game, and both Ewen McKenzie and Eddie Jones are going to pick the 3 things that they want to talk about from each of the matches, and we'll discuss those as we go through. We'll then look at 3 things that have happened off the field, which have captured my attention, and then we will take your questions. So that's going to be the new shape and structure, so there's lots of things to look forward to. But we begin, as we do each week, with your voice, the third voice, and comments from YouTube. And Kent Lee says on YouTube, respect to Messrs Jones and McKenzie, a couple of rugby legends, voices of authority. Kevin Hewitt says, just want to say, really great niche that you've filled with this podcast. There are plenty of shows that feature journalists or former players, but having 2 world-class coaches who are immune to sensationalism and hyperbole is wonderfully refreshing. Great content. Thank you. And finally, from Davey Koss, he says, love this pod, the most informative rugby pod on the planet. So there you go. Thank you, Davey. And thank you to the third voice for sending those comments through. Please keep them coming. So, Ewen McKenzie, we are going to start in New Zealand with that devastating final quarter of the South African side, who just impressed on so many different levels. 43 points to 10, the biggest loss in All Black history. Your summary before we get to your 3 things.
My summary? Well, I think we saw South Africa back to... I suspect that's how Rassie wanted to start the series, and he started that way in the first at Ellis Park, played really well for 20 minutes, and then got run over by the Wallabies, and then he started to fiddle around with selections. And as we discussed the other day, he went with the youth formula, and that definitely worked. So you had a hungry forward pack that were intent on going forward, led by Wiese. He was outstanding at number 8. And then some really exciting young backs that were keen to get their hands on the ball and make things happen. And they weren't without mistake, but they were everywhere. So they had a really good blend of the ball was in front of the forwards. They were hungry and getting stuck in. Their set piece was good. The scrum was good, particularly second half. And then and the line-out functioned well. New Zealand, not so much. And then they had some backs to finish things off, whereas the last couple of games they didn't have the backs to finish it off, I didn't feel. He took a pump with some of the selections, and we saw the likes of Hooker on the wing, who looked like I thought he was a flanker or something. I couldn't believe the number on his back. And then he showed a turn of speed. He was terrific in the air. He came across the right wing and filled in for Colby and was great, retrieved possession in the contest. So some really interesting players there. So it was a really good blend for me, and that's probably the brand of football he wants to play going into the World Cup. And we've got a bit of a taste of that. I think he wanted to go through there, but he went away from it after the loss in Ellis Park, and now he's gone back to it, and he got a really good pay. I mean, record score, you can't say much more than that. New Zealand, they just looked a bit off the pace everywhere, really. So, that was... I felt sorry for him.
Okay, well, we'll come back to your 3 things, but Eddie Jones, your summary of the 43 points to 10 win of the Springboks over New Zealand.
Well, the key stat was, I think, approximately, I'm not absolute on this, South Africa had about 100 carries for 690 metres, and New Zealand had slightly less, about 95 for 240 metres.
Right.
So unfortunately, you don't get any points for going to the sideline.
Yeah.
So that's the game, mate. And South Africa won the aerial contest. I think the first 10 balls they won 9 or 8 of them. They won the line-outs. They had advantage in the scrum in the first half. So you put all that together, it's a pretty conclusive victory.
Yep. All right, we'll come back to your 3 things, but over to you, Ewen McKenzie. Your homework this week has been to pick out 3 things, because this is what the audience is looking for, is these insights from 2 of the world's leading coaches about the things that they need to learn and to enjoy understanding a little bit more about our great game.
Yeah, well, the thing, I mean, from a coaching point of view, I think he had the back line. The back line was where he wanted to go, and he went away from that. So it gets down to selection. Selection's the first thing you've got to do in the week when you play a game. He actually got the back line he wanted. So we're able to see, a hungry forward pack that was good on possession winning, and a good back line was able to do something with the possession, whereas I hadn't seen that in recent weeks. So I think he backed himself there in selection. I think he got a bit nervous after the Ellis Park and went away from that. They were very good at putting. The second thing they were really good at doing was using attacking kicks. The back line was very good at, when in doubt, they were able to put those little grubbers through, keep the ball, keep the forwards going forward, and they had momentum onto the ball all the time. So they won the kicking contest. Well, when they won, they had more kicks than New Zealand did. It was 32-30. But in fact, both games, the team that kicked the most won. But the use of the attacking kicking and keeping everything on the front foot was really impressive. And the other thing for me, from a negative point, the third thing I wanted to say was, when you watch the games now, I was looking at the New Zealand phase attack, and obviously they drop the pass out the back to a playmaker, but it's a very stationary, what it seems to me to be a very stationary action. So yes, they toss the ball out the back, but it's to a guy standing still, so there's no momentum there to be able to capitalise on it. And you compare that with what Argentina does, where there's someone coming onto the ball hard and they're able to capitalise on the pace and get wider of that ruck. I didn't see any value for that phase attack, and they've been doing it for a while and it's been successful. But I've got a feeling that maybe they've got to have a rethink about how they're setting up their phase play, because it just looked a bit predictable, and they were unable to get to the advantage line. There was one occasion there when they had a deep back line set, and I think they kicked from 12. And I thought, well, there's clearly no commitment because there was no chase. So they were so deep, there was no chase on the kick. So there's some functional issues going on there. I know they lost the halfback early, but Christie's been playing pretty much all the games and he's been pretty solid. But there's some functionality things going on there in terms of how they're trying to play the game. So I'm not quite sure they got the phase side. So that was the third point for me, which when you're comparing with what's going on elsewhere, they're looking a little bit off the pace there.
Eddie Jones, your comments on Ewen McKenzie's 3 points?
Well, attack-wise for New Zealand, they're an interesting team in attack. I think they're still trying to find their way. I don't think they're quite sure how they want to play, which is symbolic of a team that's growing. And, Scott Robertson's only been in the job for 18 months, new coaching staff. They don't have really established players at 10 and 15. That's a bit of a contradiction because Barrett's played, nearly 100 tests, but hasn't played a lot of rugby at 10 over the last period of time, and seems loath to take the ball as a first receiver. He seems to like it to take it as a second receiver, as Ewen mentioned. And that means now they're playing so deep behind the gain line that unless everything absolutely clicks out of that, they're a long way from the gain line. Their forwards have got a long way to go back to attack again. And that was the result of the small number of metres they had going forward. So definitely agree with what Ewen said there. What were the other points?
I just talked about Rassie getting, selection-wise, getting the back line that he probably wanted. Started the season out and then went away from it because he was under pressure, and then he said, "Bugger, I'm going to pick the young guys," and he got an outcome for that. I mean, that was key for me. That's backing yourself in selection.
Yeah. So and Ewan's right there, I reckon, because at the start of the week he went early, and I reckon he said to those young blokes, he said, "You've got carte blanche to attack, but you don't attack from our half. You kick everything from our half," which they basically did. And then as soon as you get the ball in your half, you can go for your life. And that's what they seem like they do. And so it seemed to really free them up, because that Willemsen, he's a athletic beast, but we haven't seen him actually ever play like that to that extent where he's running over the top of people. That try he scored close to the line where he ran through the winger and the Tapoa, the centre, where he just burst through them like he was a rugby league front rower to score the try. You don't see that too often. Yeah, and that was incredible. So that, I think they were unleashed. Backed them early in the week, said you're playing, you're going to play, but you got to make sure you kick out of our half, and they kicked well and won the contest and won fractured ball in the opposition's half, and were able to attack with a fair amount of freedom. And as Ewen said, I think they used the kicks behind in the wide rucks. The other thing maybe they spoke about, they didn't want rucks inside the 15. They'd rather put the ball behind, make New Zealand play out of there, attack that wide breakdown and keep it in their half so they kick back to their advantage. So, agree with what Link was saying.
You saw Rassie pulling his hair out a couple of times because they probably almost went the grubber a couple of times too early, and they were hot on attack and they went to the boot, and you could see Rassie pulling his hair out because there's obviously a balance between you've already done all the hard work, you've got yourself 10 metres out, there's some consolidation of possession there to make sure you get over the try line rather than put a 50-50 in that ends up in touch or rebounds, or they get the ball back and set up a ruck and kick it out. So there's a fine line between that grubber attack and when you actually got to hang on to the pill, make sure you don't go into touch and make sure you get possession, because in the end they've got the forward pack that can bash their way over towards the goal post and bash their way over there anyway. So they just got to make sure they retain the ball. And they were really good at getting it back, and that's what I said. Some of those key players, Wiese coming in and Hooker, for instance, were great, and Willemser, and they were all good, and they were good. They were good for 80.
It was,
and I reckon just the other point. Sorry, Pemby, on that.
Yeah,
I reckon was the real contrast in styles that, as Ewen said, New Zealand looked to be very structured. A lot of second man plays. A lot of dummy lead runners without really being lead runners, with the event of playing out of the back. Whereas South Africa, the structure they had was in their organised kicking. And then as soon as they got the ball in their half, they just seemed to look for space and play to space really quickly with, some really good athletic fast backs. And they looked faster, didn't they? But you always look faster when you're going forward.
Yeah.
Has anyone ever won the Olympics 100 running backwards?
No, that's right. They kept the ball in front of the forwards. The forwards ran forward all day, and that's the ideal game for you.
What about, and how impressed were you, given that by half time they'd lost one of the starting locks, starting fly half, starting 15, and they got better as the game went on, and as they rotated their bench through the second half, they seemed to maintain cohesion, maintain confidence, and maintain the game plan, Ewen McKenzie. It was frightening, the amount of depth that they were able to show.
Yeah, I think they said on commentary there were 5 players off at the 37-minute mark. There had already been 5 players that left the field from both sides. So it was an attritional game in that sense. But, they cover that, and that's where they get the pay for all of the rotating of players over the years and whatever. You're able to bring guys in, and they came on or adjusted positions on the field. We mentioned Hooker went to the right wing, and he was able to maintain the standards that Colby had already set in the game in terms of contesting and pressure. He was able to maintain that, moving from the left wing to the right wing. And so, they didn't miss a beat. And sometimes that happens that way. Australia's been able to do the same thing too. They've been able to pinch hit, put the halfback on the wing and whatever, and still put on impressive second half performances. So it's about more than just having an injury. It's about covering it, but it's about covering it in a way where and I think the structure thing's interesting. I think what he says is right. In New Zealand, when you watch it, you can predict almost the pattern, but you got to say, is the pattern actually achieving anything? For me, it's just putting them deeper and getting them further away from trying to. It's like watching American football. They get a penalty in there, they're second down and 29 metres or something like 29 yards. Like it's a hike to get back across the advantage line, and the forwards are always running backwards. And that's the worst case scenario. So there's some opportunities there for them to look at that, because they're good enough to change that pretty quickly. They've got some very talented players, and get their forwards on the front foot and make it a bit easier for them.
For you, Eddie Jones, when you were watching the game, just prior to coming on and starting recording the program, we were discussing Wiese at number 8, and in last week's program, you told everyone, watch this guy because he is one of their pillars. Certainly one of the guys who carries the ball forward aggressively. Who aside from Wiese, who were some of the other players that you looked at that you think made a above average contribution to that very fine performance by the Springboks?
Well, there's an interesting little story about Wiese. So Wiese was number 8 at Cheetahs. Not really going anywhere. Young player at Cheetahs, probably a little bit overweight. But Steve Borthwick took over Leicester Tigers, and he uses, as you know, Gordon Hamilton.
Yeah,
and uses the data. Yeah, and they've got that sort of money ball approach. What players give you the most value? And so they signed him for a very reasonable amount, cheap as chips. And he became, in 2 years, I think he was the Premiership Player of the Year, and in three or 4 years he's become a Springbok number 8 because he had that capacity for hard work. He'd do all the hard things, and they're the money ball players. They're the ones that give you value. And you can see every time he was like Skelton was in the Lions series. Every time he hit someone, they stayed hit. Every time he carried, he went forward. And those sort of players in the middle of the field one player like that makes such a difference. It changes the game. Like we played Tonga on the weekend, and that Ben Tummy Furnu's 34, 35 now, and he'd have to be 160 Ks. But he's so passionate about Tonga. For 10 minutes, he went flat out. And I'm telling you, it changed the game for 10 minutes because of the size of his carries. He'd carry through 3 blokes, get them good ruck ball. When he hit someone, they stayed hit. And it makes such a difference. And it was amazing for a bloke like him. I know I'm raving on a bit here, but he said he wouldn't go back to Bordeaux because he was so passionate about qualifying Tonga for the World Cup and for Tonga doing well. And it's really nice to see that love of the country, in this, particularly this professional era, to see a player do that. He's not getting paid, probably costing him money to play for Tonga. So Wiese, as Ewen mentioned, hooker, his aerial skills, he looks the real deal. And you think about the riches they got. Colby wins everything, and then he goes off and Hooker starts to win everything. He was very impressive. And I think New Zealand really missed, as I said before, I really think they missed Cody Taylor. Their line out fell apart. I've got no doubt he would have stabilised the scrum a bit more in the first half. And it showed that, maybe the second and third hooker in New Zealand still got a bit of work to do.
So
what's also interesting will be, as a direct result of that game, so guys like Detroit and Khaleesi, they all got to play their game rather than have to, because Wiese was doing all the bruising in the middle, so they were able to play a little bit looser and be a bit more effective in terms of the way they normally play. But what's interesting to me is, say, you take it the 2 centres that have been the mainstays of the Springboks, they weren't there. Etzebeth wasn't there. So you start to think, what's it going to look like? I know they might be resting them or whatever, but you get young performance and out comes a record score in New Zealand. That says a lot, So there may be the guys like Creel, and even though he's been captaining the side the last few weeks, what happens to those guys? I'll be interested to see how Rassie handles all of that, because when you have good wins, it sort of cements, and Australia's the same problem. Australia started to rest players last week, and I'm not sure that helped their cause. I'm not sure. But, I'll be interested to see how Rassie handles that side of it now, because you've got some of their most experienced and most effective players who weren't part of the occasion.
So that's for Rassie to worry about, but certainly in New Zealand, they've reacted savagely, the fans and the media, to Scott Robertson's the loss and his leadership of the team and the team, his selection, his coaching team. So the week before, everything was fine after Eden Park, but now it's a disaster. Both of you have coached after you've taken a fair toweling. And, you know, the heat comes on, the players and all the rest of it. Eddie Jones, how do you manage that? How do you manage that sort of pressure as a coach? How do you sort of, you know, move towards restoring some equilibrium to enable you to continue to improve, to go forward, while everybody else outside the team is losing their minds about everything that's now wrong? How have you gone about that in the past?
Well, before I answer that, I reckon there's a couple of interesting stats. If you look at the history of the games between South Africa and New Zealand, New Zealand were well ahead, about 60% to 40 in every test that's been played. Since 2019, South Africa won approximately 70% of the tests, New Zealand won 30% of the tests. So this is not a Scott Robertson thing. That's the first thing. So all this, he's not the right coach, he's not doing the right job, is just rubbish, absolute rubbish. Like, he's a good coach, and I'm sure he'll find the right way. At the moment, South Africa's stronger than New Zealand. But then the other thing you look at is in the Rugby Championship, I think every team's gone win-loss, win-loss. And they're basically, their two test series are shared. So, there's no one at the moment who's absolutely outstanding. They all seem to be in some sort of transitional mode, and probably Argentina's the most settled team of all of them. New Zealand's definitely going through a transitional, and for New Zealand, they can't stomach a transitional period because they're expected to win all the time, but they are. And South Africa's going through it. And, a week ago, Rassie was the worst coach in the world. Now he's the best coach in the world. So all of this is rubbish, mate. So as a coach, that's how you treat it, as rubbish. You work out what you got to do for your team to go forward. The thing that gets affected is the players' confidence, because they read the social media. When they're saying nice things about them, they like to read it, and they like all that sort of stuff when it's good. But when it's not good, it does affect them. So you just got to find ways of keeping their confidence up, good training, good messages, and make them keep believing. It's like that old Ted Lasso, mate. The Apple one. It's not far from the truth. You've got to get them to believe.
Yeah. And you and McKenzie, how do you build belief in teams after they've just taken a hiding like that?
Well, sometimes the scoreboard's a little bit erroneous. When you look at the stats, I'm talking the South Africa game. South Africa had an edge in possession, and they certainly had a lot of run meters, like heaps of run meters. They're the only things. The rest of it's all pretty even. So you got to focus on where you went wrong, and you got to work out whether you're picking the right team. So that's for the coach. So that's probably the most important contribution. But you do have to isolate and lock down and make sure you can focus. You got to give hope. So you got to be able to sell that in a short space of time. So the Monday's a really important day. Sunday, Monday is really important, because you got to make maybe if you're going to make hard calls or whatever, you got to get it done on the Monday morning, and you got to have a game plan that makes sense to the players. You got to have something that's logical. So it is, in the reality of the championship, it is win-loss. So that's the reality of it. They'll be looking. They've got Australia now coming up, and that'll probably be the worst thing they can do is lose to Australia. So I'm sure New Zealand will be very focused on that regardless. So a week's a long time. You can be in, down the gurgler in a week, and you can be like top of the world. So that's what happens, and you get used to that. I usually find you can have the biggest win, and Rassie would know this. You have a fantastic win like that, but he would have been back to the drawing board, thinking about his next game and whatever. You do a little bit of celebrating, not much, because that's the cycle. Your next game, if you don't perform, you're under the pump. So yes, you enjoy it, and it's in the record books. But other than that, the process is the same.
Yeah.
You're going to sit there and think about your selections, think about what you're going to play. It's a different team, different circumstances, different referee, and the referees are making a difference in the game depending on who you get. It is having an impact on the games. So it's just you got to move on, and hopefully they don't. You just get them focused on the task, not what they're saying in the media.
A final question just around the South Africa-New Zealand match before we move to the Argentina 28-26 win over Australia. Just your thoughts on the referee, Amish Kelly. Did you think he did a good job? He certainly came away with strong reviews.
Yeah, I thought he handled the game pretty well. It's really when you compare games, you see moments. I think South Africa, there was a knockdown there and there was no yellow card, so I think he felt the game better than. Whereas in the other game, there was 2 yellow cards for deliberate knockdowns, and that had an impact on the score, big time. So I think he felt the game pretty well, and in the end, the team sorted it out. I didn't see a lot. I didn't write down a lot of controversial things that I thought were where normally I do write down things that irritate me, and I didn't write down much for that game. So that's I thought he did a pretty good job.
All right. Okay, Eddie Jones, before that match at the weekend, the sky was out. It was a record crowd. There were probably more gold jerseys at the Allianz Stadium in Sydney than for any other Wallaby Test match. Certainly in my history, I've never seen a crowd like it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to be there, but the atmosphere, it was packed. Everything was set to go. What were the 3 things that you took away in your analysis of the Argentinian win over the Wallabies?
Well, I think, there's been 2 games between Australia and Argentina. They're both nip and tuck games. They've both been decided the score at the end of the game. And I don't think there's much between the 2 teams at all. So, for Australia, I think they're still going in the right direction. They're playing good rugby. They obviously got in a better position earlier in the game than they had been previous tests, and that's the way. Like you want to start the game earlier than you finish, then you don't finish the game too well. Sometimes you're a broken car that an old car that you fix one part of the car and then the next game another thing breaks. And Australia's still searching for that really that top 4 consistency. They don't have that yet, but they're within. They can reach that now. They can feel that now, and that's their next step. How do they get that real consistency in the game, so that they're not having games where they start well and don't finish well. Don't start well and then finish really well. They just lack a bit of that consistency. In Argentina, they're a good, brave team. They've got a certain way they play. It's high velocity, high movement of the ball. And I thought, their back row again is a part of the game that helps distinguish them. Zach Kremer, his defensive efforts and his defensive movements is absolutely outstanding for a big man. Like, he's one of those guys you watch and he just likes to tackle. Like, they're the sort of players you wanted to. He just loves tackling. You can see he's bouncing on his feet. He's getting off the line. He's hitting blokes. He rolls up. He gets on his feet again. He goes again. And then you got that Gonzalez who's got good feet, and the number 8 has got good work rate. And the game, some of the games are changing a little bit where that speed and mobility of your back row is making a hell of a difference. It wasn't the case so much in the South Africa, New Zealand game where it was more, square, hit it up type back row play. Whereas in the Australian-Argentina game, and it was a day game, and day games, you just have a look at that Raiders-Broncos game on Sunday afternoon at Canberra Stadium, It has a different feel about it. The ball movement's quicker, the game's quicker. The sun's out, the intensity's higher, so there was speed in the game. So great game of rugby, good game of rugby. Really enjoyed it.
Okay, for you and McKenzie, what were the 3 things that you took away from Australia Argentina?
probably more discussion points, I guess. I mean, I agree with Eddie. The game, you got two pretty evenly matched teams, a different style of attack, but the three things that for me was obviously the yellow cards for me still influenced the game, and so we had Jorgensen off, and then we had Carreras off later in the game. As soon as he went off, and people go, oh yeah, it's a yellow card, you've got to play through that period. As soon as he went off, Australia scored 2 tries, but the philosophical approach of Argentina was to not contest the rucks. They immediately, and I was watching it, they immediately stepped back at the rucks, made sure they had numbers on their feet, right? So that means there's no pressure on possession. So then you're just playing, and that's obviously what they've decided to do because they all did it. So the contest which they were so good at in the back row in particular, in terms of getting in and scrapping, that just disappeared for 10 minutes, and Australia went try, and then suddenly they were back in the game. So for me, the yellow card, and I thought neither was worthy, because I look at Colby, who took the intercept and scores. The two guys who did it have got a high skill level and could have easily taken the intercept and changed and scored themselves, both of them, right? Jorgensen and Chris. They could easily have done it. In the end, they didn't. They weren't able to. They weren't slapping the ball down. So then we have this situation. They go in the bin, and so you get a lopsided game going on, and so that does affect it. There was 2 tries scored in that part of the game, and maybe even in the first part. So that's, for me, is a problem. There was different outcomes on, again, to refereeing, different outcomes on net contact. You know, Wilson got away with it in the first half. Kremer didn't in the second half, for what I thought was neither was much. And so the first one, yes. The second one, there was bugger all in it, so I don't know how they even came up with the decision. But anyway, it seems to go to commentary sometimes. The commentators get excited about things. I don't know if the TMO listens to the commentary. I'm not sure. But 2 different outcomes. And then we saw the forward pass later in the game. Everyone talked about that. So there was that refereeing bit. We were all impressed with the referee's guns. His arms he's obviously spent a lot of time in the gym. I was impressed with that. So looks like he takes care of himself. So that was important. The other 2 questions. So that was point 1, sort of the refereeing influence on the game. And I thought he actually refereed pretty well. But those moments where he's forced to make decisions with assistance, and I don't know how they got the last. For me, it was a forward pass. In fact, there was 2 forward passes in that last try for Australia. But anyway, that's given Australia 2 extra points in the competition. So these things have impacts. So now they're on top of the table, and they could have been 2 points further back. So all credit to Australia, but you're expecting the performance of the officials to be better than that. Second point, touch or points. Right, Australia's persisted with this idea, and it's got them kudos and it's got them through games. But early in the game in particular, when there's easy points on offer, they again went to the sideline and came up with nothing. Argentina just diligently took the points. Eddie in his game against Tonga, he just kept taking the points. He's leading by 38, 41. It just kept going up. He kept taking the points. And I see it in other games, and that's something. It's a discussion for Australia about whether you just take those easy points and back yourself to get back up the field, especially early on, and you start trying to build the scoreboard pressure. Because I think that they're leaving. I make notes every week on that, and I think that they're leaving easy points on the park that allow them to build a base. You've got to score a certain amount of points to beat certain teams. You know, that's just what you got to do. And same against New Zealand. To beat New Zealand, you got to score. I think it's 23 or something points in a game, so you've got to get them from somewhere. So you've got to take them when they're on offer, especially if you've got a kick in front. So that's a philosophical question. And then thirdly is I guess from my point of view, the Wallabies get behind. And it's become a trademark, and it's admirable, and the fans love it. But I sort of wonder. I keep saying to myself, why do they get so far behind? And then they've got to have this miracle comeback. The miracle comeback, you're just not going to get there every week, and they didn't get there. But why are we relying on a miracle comeback all the time? Why can't we get out of the blocks and get on the scoreboard and build it and get in front from the start? Well, we're doing all these big games, we're watching him come from behind. So that's, for me, from a coaching point of view, go, well, why is that? Because you're getting great value out of the bench and that, but it's one of those things you've got to start looking at from how do we get a better start. So that's probably point number 3 for me, is how do the Wallabies get a better start so that they're not having to perform miracles in the second half. And in fact, that could be a big lead like the South Africa and New Zealand scoreline, where you're having a big win, rather than just trying to get there at the death, which is good for the crowd, but
Eddie Jones, your thoughts around Ewen McKenzie's 3 points and that question about touch or points?
It's an interesting one. I think, there's always a trend in the game, and I think the only trend you need to have is to be aware of the game situation. What's the referee doing? As Ewan said, from a coaching point of view, how many points are you likely to need to score to win? How can you get at least 2? If you 1 score ahead, how can you get 2 scores ahead? So 10's better than 7 being ahead, 17's better than 14 being ahead. Those sort of things you take into consideration. And I think you've got to be flexible about it. I don't think, a one way approach is right, that you take all the shots or you go for the corner all the time. So I think, that's a really valid point from Link. Referee, this knockdown, mate, we had one on the weekend. If you're watching volleyball, he would have won. The bloke would have won a point for it. The ball went flying back into the grandstand. He hit it that hard, and the referee gave a penalty. At one stage, he first announced the scrum. He said, "Right, with scrum," and then someone said, "Oh, you better give a penalty here," and then he went to the penalties. So I don't know what they're looking for. And it's quite clear, if you're making an attempt to catch the ball and you're reaching your hand out to catch the ball, then it's a genuine attempt to catch the ball. If you're trying to wrap your arm around and it's a swinging motion, then more likely or not you're trying to knock the ball down, right? And that's as simple as it is. And all this other rubbish they go on with, you got to have 2 hands. Well, who reaches for a ball with 2 hands to try to catch it? It's impossible.
No,
so there's a lack of common sense.
Yeah, I agree. It's frustrating. Colby doesn't score the try. He could have knocked that on. Instead, he scores a try, but he doesn't go for it. He goes for it because he's backing himself, and he read the play, and he got his one hand out, and he got the ball. So it's part of the skill factor. Those 2 guys who got sent to the bin were both skillful enough to retrieve those balls and go the length of the field. No problem. So instead, they end up sitting on the sideline watching the game and putting the team under pressure. And I just think it's a spur of the moment thing, and I think, okay, penalise them, but don't yellow card. That's just ridiculous. I think it's ridiculous. I'm sick of watching it influence games. So,
all right, that's a job.
I think back to Brian Habana, who was one of the great experts in intercepts. He used to practice it. He'd practice it. He was diligent in practicing with Cheryl Call, the eye vision person, and he became outstanding at that. And you can see Cheslin Colby's got absolutely the same skill. And the better start, I thought Justin Harris gave a very good interpretation of it at the start, talking about what does it mean, try to assert yourself, or how are you going to assert yourself, what are the contest areas you can assert yourself in. And I think it's about just practicing that mindset of doing it, and it comes back to maybe the way you train. How do you start training? You're getting either good habits or bad habits, and they can change quite quickly. You can go from being a good starting side to being a not good starting side. But I think, the old thing is that you get what you practice. So if maybe there's something there to look at for the Wallabies.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, people love predictions.
There was a funny moment at halftime. I don't know if anyone was watching when Wilson was giving his sort of the last final words in the huddle in the dressing room, and he completely Pollard with his elbow, and almost I thought they were going to call for an HIA in the dressing room because he got Pollard, and Pollard's there holding his head, and then you could see him. They broke up, and you could see Pollard walking away, rubbing his head, and I'm thinking, "There's an HIA." No one's ever spotted it. So that was funny. There's always good amusement in the dressing room. I love watching when the coach is ranting. I love to see how many players are actually watching or paying attention. That's always a good sign about where the coach sits with the playing group.
So listen, people love predictions, and we now are 2/3 of the way through this intriguing competition that unfortunately looks like it's on life support and will disappear over the next couple of years. So indeed, we should enjoy it while it survives. So Ewen, McKenzie, 2/3 of the way through. We're all clear. Australia versus New Zealand, 2 matches. South Africa versus Argentina, 2 matches. One in South Africa, 1 in London. And in Australia, 1 in New Zealand, 1 in Australia. So,
yeah, well, it's interesting because all the games so far have been, 2 away for some teams. So, I like Argentina at home, but South Africa's done pretty well over there. So, I'd like to think that'll probably go 1-1, and the same with Australia. New Zealand will rally for the first one, and then maybe when they're in Perth, it'll be a bit different. So that would make for an I've got no idea what that puts the table at the end of the competition, but it's all pretty tight. And so, yeah, I'll just go each way bet. I think one each.
And for you, Eddie Jones, what do you see?
$10,000, mate, on South Africa winning both. South Africa play well in Argentina. I don't think they've ever lost a test set. And they love playing at London. They love being in London. Their records
that's
there.
True.
I think they gave the All Blacks 40-point beating there. So I think they'll win their 2 games, which should be enough for them to win the championship. Australia and New Zealand, I don't have a really good feel about it. I think Australia's moving in the right direction, but just that little lack of consistency makes it difficult to see them winning both games. And New Zealand's in this state of flux, and it's a big test for Scott Robertson now. And I hope he's getting enough support from New Zealand Rugby Union. I really mean that, because he'd be feeling the pressure. You go to New Zealand, everyone knows something about rugby. We've got Owen Franks, and without giving too much away, he's saying, you sit down anywhere and someone tells you how to play rugby, and they talk to you as though you had never played rugby in your life yourself. So he'd be getting that, and that does make you feel uncomfortable. So I hope he's getting good support. He needs to clear his head, get his selection right, make sure he's got the right balance, maybe tidy up his game plan a little bit. And they should win their home test, and maybe Australia win their home test.
All right, $10,000. Maybe you can take your winnings then and double it up on Japan versus South Africa at Wembley, Eddie Jones. Maybe. So anyway,
no problems, mate. No problems.
So the focus of the rugby world will stay in England with the Women's Rugby World Cup as the top 4 teams come together in the semi-finals, and certainly looking forward to those matches. And we'll be having our preview program with Wallaroo Bella McKenzie tomorrow. But the other big match will be the final of the Pacific Nations Cup between the Eddie Jones coached Japanese side and Fiji. Fiji comprehensive winners over Canada at the weekend, 63 points to 10. Eddie Jones Japan, 62 points to 24 over Tonga. And the USA qualified through to the 2027 Rugby World Cup with a 29 points to 13 win over Samoa. Samoa now take on Chile in a 2-match series to decide who is the 23rd team at the 2027 World Cup. And after that, the loser of that will then take on Belgium, Namibia, or Brazil, or Paraguay for the final position at the 2027 Rugby World Cup. So we are certainly coming down to the wire in terms of the selection of the qualification of those teams. But Eddie Jones, a good win over Tonga, but the Fijian side, you've been talking about them for weeks in terms of their improvement. They showed it once again. It's going to be a cracking game of rugby between your side and the Fijians in Salt Lake City this weekend. How are you thinking about your preparation for that match?
Well, we got into Salt Lake City this afternoon. and there's two things that stood out, mate: the Rocky Mountains and the number of American flags. I've never seen so many American flags. Like there was a presidential parade on.
Yeah.
So,
well, I think that might have something to do with the assassination of
Charlie
Kirk.
I think. Big time.
So
we had a bit of a talk about that in our team meeting this afternoon.
Yep.
Right.
No one go out with any anti-Trump T-shirts on.
Yeah, very good. So listen, in terms of the rugby though, the Fijians are fabulous to watch, aren't they? Because they've obviously have always had that flair, they've had that size, they've had that speed, they've got that ability to move the ball, but over time now they've produced more structure, more patterns, a higher percentage perhaps way of playing the game, although they do still throw it around. The ball does hit the deck quite a few times. But how are you thinking about your Japanese team taking them on to actually claim what has been a great tournament so far, and certainly one that's attracted quite a bit of interest around the world?
Again, if we just take 3 points. One, I'm concerned about Samoa. Samoa is a rugby country. They've been a great contributor of players. They've been a good participant at the World Cup. Play a distinctive style of rugby, but at the moment they've obviously got a lot of problems. They're struggling to get their players, and they need some help. Maybe World Rugby's got to come in and help them a bit more. So that's one thing. I think the second thing, Fiji, as we've spoken about before, has benefited from having the Drua. They've got another team at home called the Warriors, which sits underneath the Drua. So they've got a pathway now, and most of their best players play in France. So they've developed their players really well. So to me, it's not about the way they play, it's about the development of their players. They're coming in with better strength and conditioning bases, better skill bases, better exposure to high performance rugby. They're well coached by the ex-Hawthorn full forward Mick Byrne. You look at his career as a Hawthorn player, then firstly as a skills coach in Australia, and then as a skills coach in New Zealand, to elevate to a head coach at the Fijian side. He's had a great coaching career, and I had a quick chat to him at the airport today. But for us, we're 13th in the world, they're 9th. And I was talking to this bloke at the airport, a bloke from Salt Lake City, and he said, "Which side do you coach?" He said, I said, "Oh, the Japanese." He said, "Geez, those Fijian blokes look a bit bigger than yours." So, so we've got to play. We've got to play fast. We've got to play smart, and we've got to play tough. So it's a good challenge for us. We've got a young group. I'm really looking forward to it. I can't wait for us to play. Yeah,
exactly.
Eddie's a bandit at the airport. He's always talking to people. Eddie's coming. But talking about Mick Byrne, Eddie was the first one Eddie employed him as a kicking coach, and I was the assistant coach, and I worked with Mick in Sydney with the kickers for the Brumbies. That's when he first started in rugby. So, ironically, it's been a long journey, and he's worked his way through there. And one of the All Blacks and moved into skills coaching, but he used to start as a kicking/goal kicking coach with us at the Brumbies. And Eddie got him on board, and I managed him up in Sydney with the Sydney-based squad. So,
and Rod McQueen, or Timmy Lane then Rod McQueen brought him on for the 99 Rugby World Cup. Yeah. And he did great things.
Right.
Great career, mate. Great career.
Yeah. Excellent. So you and McKenzie, you're sitting alongside Eddie Jones this weekend. How do you beat Fiji?
Well, I watched the highlights of Eddie's game on the weekend. I think they've got some pretty good assets. I love the pace of the game. I love they got the best ball running tight head prop and hooker going around. They're terrific. They're really good. And I think the pace of the game.
They're box office though.
Really effective.
I'll tell you about him. He's the only tight end in the world that pushes the halfback out to take a quick tap.
I know. I saw it. I'm thinking, but so that's. The quick taps were there. Scored a really nice try off a quick tap. I think the tempo of the game is really important. Keeping's off is also a good part. If you've got the ball, they're not scoring any points. You've got to almost bore them a little bit. But to be fair to Fiji, they were a side that you could starve them in possession. They'd lose interest I'm talking 10 years ago, but in recent years, they've been very effective at sort of playing a disciplined game and, almost a sort of typical game without all the flair and hoopla. And they've been very good at being able to do that and win. So it's going to be a challenge, but I do like the tempo of the game. I like the way that the Japanese team scrums, and they can score tries in different ways. So they'll be a handful. I don't think the area I saw was, with the big Tongans, they got close to the line, hard to stop, and Fiji could be the same. So where the game's played will be pretty important, I think. So Japan will hopefully keep the ball at the other end of the field as much as possible.
Very good. Well, certainly, as I say, with the Rugby Championship paused for this weekend, it will be a match that will attract enormous amounts of interest as we look to these two emerging teams, and certainly looking for a line towards matches later in the year, but also looking forward through to 2027. So just a few things that have caught my eyes, and I already mentioned them about the gold jerseys at the Allianz Stadium in Sydney. Absolutely outstanding. The energy that the Argentinian crowd brought, it looked like an incredible occasion, record crowd. So congratulations to everyone involved in putting on that particular occasion. New Zealand, the two matches against South Africa, something that's caught my eye are the choir singing in the two matches where they're singing the national anthems. They were probably the best singing before both matches. So a big shout out to those two choirs. A third thing about the French women at the Rugby World Cup. The top 14 moved 4 of their matches so that the rugby fans in France could watch their team, and they attracted 4.6 million viewers watching their match at the weekend where they won 18 points to 13 over Ireland. A tough match for Ireland, but certainly the women's game growing, and I was... Again, I plugged it last week, but the Rugby Union thread on Reddit is really worth having a look at. There's a lot of interesting information there. And someone was saying that 30% growth in the number of women registered players in France this year. So certainly women's rugby moving in France. And the final thing that's caught my eye, and I sent it round to both you, Eddie Jones, and Ewen McKenzie. And Eddie Jones, I know you have some ideas about the NFL, but National Football League, absolute giant of a sport there in North America. They are growing. They want to get out of North America. They want to expand. And on the Gold Coast, there is a young man by the name of Teariki Siola. He has signed with the NFL Academy, but at the same time, he has signed with the Queensland Reds, both for 3 years. And they are working together to develop this athlete, both as an NFL player and as a rugby player. Now, people who have listened to this podcast before will know that I am very keen on this idea of World of Rugby working with the NFL in some way, shape or form. And Ewen McKenzie, it would seem a great idea to develop a strapping young athlete like Teariki Siola, who's about 115 kilos. He's a 16-year-old boy. We need to do this more. It's a good opportunity to work with the NFL to co-develop young athletes. So maybe he makes it, maybe he doesn't, but certainly there could be an opportunity for him to play in the big league or play in the big leagues in rugby. What do you think about this idea of co-developing athletes?
Well, I'm not averse to it. I think he could be playing other codes, so I suppose in that way it keeps him sort of in front of rugby, but in the end, if he's going to be any good in terms of NFL, he'll be gone financially anyway. He'll be gone to some sort of, their first year contract there's worth more than anything he's going to get in Australia. So it'll depend on how he goes. So hopefully he does well he's a good athlete, clearly. So hopefully he does well. I wouldn't like to think he's just going to fall back on, if he doesn't make it there, he's going to fall back. I'd like to think that he's going to work in both streams and then get to make a decision. It's not a financial one. It's about where he thinks his best future is. And I would go back to the Cliffy Palu story where we try not to make it about the money, but make it about where he thinks he's going to get the best career, total career I'm talking about. So, it's an interesting model, and but certainly worth developing, and anything we can do to keep develop the players faster is a good thing. So,
Eddie Jones, you've been in the United States for the last, I don't know, what's about two and a half weeks now, watching college football and seeing how big that is, looking at the NFL, how big that is. What are your thoughts about this idea of this co-development of athletes, but also some of your broader thoughts about how rugby and the NFL might be able to work together?
Well, I think the American expression is crossover player.
Yep.
And very few have crossed the road. Because I just think the games are too different. And it's a nice novelty. It's like Michael Jordan trying to play baseball. They're two completely different sports. And one or two might come through. Like there's a boy from South Sydney Rabbits who's playing for Philadelphia Eagles. Like he's made it. He's in the starting team. And he's one of the highest paid players in his defensive position. I think he defends on the blind side of the quarterback. I can't recall his name, but he's made it. But, if you think of the tens of other kids who have gone over there and tried to do the same thing who haven't made it. And I think for a rugby player, rugby's such by the age of 16 or 17, if you want to be a good rugby player, I think you have to play rugby. You've got to learn the nuances of the sport. And I think by being involved in American football, it's not going to do your rugby career any good. And the opposite thing, we had a kid, an Aussie kid who was from the Blue Mountains, Hayden Smith, who played for Saracens, who ended up playing for the USA. He went over to Philadelphia Eagles on a training contract. And he said he had to spend 12 hours in the coach's room every day trying to learn the schemes, and he just couldn't do it. And that's why most of those guys who go over and trial in the international role don't make it, because they just don't have the base of knowledge. And it's the same for rugby. So I'm probably on the opposite side, mate, unfortunately.
Okay. And any other thoughts that you might have picked up there when you see just how big the NFL is when you are in the States? It's such a dominant sport. Tens of millions of people watching every game, 23 million, 18 million, 25 million. Like it's so big. And then college football as well. What observations have you made of NFL as it relates to rugby and rugby's plans to make a bigger impression in the gigantic market of North America?
Well, the thing that struck me is the presentation of the sport. I think it's Thursday night's NFL football, so they have a series of, pre games, and they have quality people on it. Some of the best coaches are sitting on it, and you get educated comment with, some players are act the goat and they have a bit of fun, but there's some really good commentary on the game. And then the game's played, and then post that you have the post game, which is high quality again commentary, and you can actually I'm starting to learn about the game in a little bit of way by watching those. And then on a Friday, Saturday, it's just college football. And the thing about college football is just how much people love it. We were staying in a hotel in Denver, and there was a big medical conference on, and everyone who came down virtually had a university polo on. They're so in love with their university football teams, and it is that tribal love it, and it's a pure form of the sport. It's very fair, or it looks very fair, looks very fast and very clean.
Very good. All right. Well, listen, we will take one quick question here. Actually, two quick questions. Ewen McKenzie, to you first. Back Taken Help asks, what's more important to the Wallabies, winning the Bledisloe or winning the Rugby Championship?
Well, if you win the Bledisloe, it's a good way to getting to the Bledisloe anyway. You probably need to win the Bledisloe to get the other one. I think at this point in time, in terms of development, the Bledisloe is a stepping stone that the Wallabies would like to take to show that to sort of lock in the progress that's been made over the last period of time. So I think that. The other thing, the winning the competition depends on other teams' results as well. So I think that winning the Bledisloe right now would be really probably the most beneficial thing for the Wallabies.
Yep. And
because at the moment, as it sits right now, they've won 50% of their games this year, right? So that's just the reality. I know they're playing hard teams. That's the reality. So to be able to get some silverware, they had a chance last week against Argentina to get some silverware, but they haven't won the silverware that they were hoping for. So the Bledisloe is an impressive and large piece of silverware, and that's what you want to get your hands on. But you've got to win both games. It's tough to get.
A final question from Teddy Chigumba for you, Ewen McKenzie. He says, Ewen, you say you don't want the team being changed. Is it not wise to freshen them up and rest some players? It seems like it doesn't matter now who comes into the team. Injuries don't affect them as much anymore because everyone understands the system. It's all good wanting to play every game, but it's even better getting to the Bledisloe with a fit and firing squad.
Yeah, well, I get the theory of that, but they made changes last week that didn't have to make. Maybe I don't know the inner, but I suspect that there's some freshening up going on, and that they didn't win the game. I'm not saying it's direct result of that, but you've got to keep looking at your momentum and whatever. There's plenty of ways to bring players through from the bench and give them opportunities in the games and do that. So rotate players that way, and they're playing 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So they're not playing week in, week out like you would in a World Cup. So I don't think that that's I think that they had a lead in for the Lions series, and now they're playing 2 weeks on, 1 week off. So the freshening up, if you want to freshen someone up, freshen them up in training is my thoughts. If you want to give Frost or someone a break, let him have half the week off training. Let the reserve players play and train in his position. Give him a freshen up, because I can guarantee you he'd prefer to give up the training and play the game.
Yeah.
Right? That's I can guarantee it. Right? He'd prefer to have a couple of days off training and play the game rather than still have to train and then not play the game. That's for sure and for certain.
No doubt whatsoever. All right, very good. Well, thank you very much, Eddie Jones and Ewen McKenzie, for another action-packed show. I do hope, third voice, the audience out there, you like this idea of putting our coaches on the spot to make sure that they are bringing you the highest quality insights and the top three from each of the games, and also looking outside the game, because our mission here at Rugby Unity is to help secure the future prosperity of rugby union around the world, and that does mean that we do have to be very considerate and thoughtful about what is happening around the game so we can generate more interest from more people in more countries around the world. So a big thanks to Ewen and Eddie once again. We'll be back on Friday with our preview of the big final at Salt Lake City between the Fijian side and Eddie Jones's Japanese team. Should be a cracking game, but we'll come back on Friday to talk about that. And also we'll preview and have a look at some of the women's semi-finals this weekend. Top four sides are through, and it will be compelling rugby. Now, remember, your voice is crucial in shaping the future of rugby, so keep the comments and the suggestions coming, and please don't forget to subscribe on your favourite podcatcher or on YouTube. It just helps us to be found. And also, please leave us a rating or review, make a comment, give us a thumbs up, anything that sends a signal to the algorithm that this is worth listening to, as we continue to try to work out just exactly what is the business model that will sustain us over time. And don't forget to follow us on socials, at Substack. Go and catch the latest content there, but also on Instagram, on LinkedIn, and on TikTok. Every day I am on TikTok answering your questions and responding to your comments, and all the links will be in the show notes. So anyway, lots of ways to connect with us, but certainly, interestingly enough, the executive producer of the program, Mark Cartwright, gave me the news earlier this week that we started back in April, and between April and August, we got to a certain size. And between August and now, which is the middle of September, which is about 6 weeks, we have doubled across our platforms, across our podcasting, across our YouTube, across our Substack, and across our socials. So a very big thanks to all of you who have helped us to achieve that. And please spread the word. That would be much appreciated. So looking forward to our Women's World Cup program tomorrow with Bella McKenzie, and our preview show on Friday of this week. But for the moment, please, people, be kind to each other. My name is David Pembroke, and it's bye for now.